Hi, fourth graders. This is Miss Webster, and today as readers, we're going to be talking about a new genre of text called historical fiction. So our lesson today will talk about using nonfiction text to support our understanding of historical fiction. So historical fiction texts are texts that are fiction. They're not true, but they are realistic and they've happened in a specific historical time period. Our learning target is I can read a nonfiction text to support my understanding of historical fiction. Let's think of an example together. So, from what we are experiencing right now, we could imagine a student maybe years or even decades in the future reading a historical fiction text about what we are now experiencing. So they might not have the background knowledge to understand what was going on in this time period to really empathize or walk in the shoes of the character. So they may want to read a nonfiction text using their nonfiction lens, such as this Time for Kids article about the coronavirus, and that might help them understand a historical fiction text, or maybe they could understand why children were wearing masks at the grocery store, for instance, or rediscovering a new hobby like skateboarding or sidewalk chalk. So we could use a nonfiction text to build our background and help us understand why characters are doing what they're doing or why the setting is what it is in a historical fiction piece. So we're going to try an example together. If you think back to week 2 actually in social studies, we read The Story of Ruby Bridges by Robert Coles. And this was a nonfiction text, a true story about a girl in what we call the civil rights era. And this was from 1954 to 1968, this time period. And Ruby's event that we read about happened in 1957. So if you think back to that nonfiction text and what we learned, we can use this information to help us read historical fiction pieces from the same era. So what I did was I made a boxes and bullets graphic organizer to capture the main idea and some supporting details from that text just to refresh our memories of this time period. So my main idea was that Ruby Bridges overcame challenges to go to an all-white school. Again, this was back in 1957 in New Orleans, Louisiana, and this had not happened before. So some supporting details to why it was such a challenge was that federal marshals had to walk Ruby in and out of the school building each day, and Ruby had to walk through an angry mob holding signs and yelling. Okay. Also, many other families at the school chose to keep their children home rather than send them to school with Ruby. So sort of bring these details back into your mind about this real event that happened with a real first grade girl at this time period. And we're going to now read a historical fiction text together called The Other Side by Jacqueline Woodson. And this story takes place in the same historical time era, okay, but this is a fiction story or a narrative story that we can use the background knowledge that we've built to understand. So let's listen together and then we will reflect.
That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of it. White people lived on the other. And Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. That summer, there was a girl who wore a pink sweater. Each morning she climbed up on the fence and stared over at our side. Sometimes I stared back. She never sat on that fence with anybody. That girl didn't. Once, when we were jumping rope, she asked if she could play. And my friend Sandra said no, without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no. That summer, everyone and everything on the other side of that fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama why, she said, because that's the way things have always been. Sometimes when me and Mama went into town, I saw that girl with her mama. She looked sad sometimes, that girl did. Don't stare, my mama said. It's not polite. It rained a lot that summer. On rainy days, that girl sat on the fence in a raincoat. She let herself get all wet and acted like she didn't even care. Sometimes I saw her dancing around in puddles, splashing and laughing. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. That's why I bought you rainy day toys, my mama said. You stay inside here where it's warm and safe and dry. But every time it rained, I looked for that girl, and I always found her, somewhere near the fence. Someplace in the middle of the summer, the rain stopped. When I walked outside, the grass was damp, and the sun was already high up in the sky. And I stood there with my hands up in the air. I felt brave that day. I felt free. I got close to the fence, and that girl asked me my name. Clover, I said. My name's Annie, she said. Annie Paul. I live over yonder, she said. But where you see the laundry? That's my blouse hanging on the line. She smiled then. She had a pretty smile. And then I smiled, and we stood there looking at each other, smiling. It's nice up on this fence, Annie said. You can see all over. I ran my hand along the fence. I reached up and touched the top of it. A fence like this was made for sitting on, Annie said. She looked at me sideways. My mama says I shouldn't go on the other side, I said. My mama says the same thing, but she never said nothing about sitting on it. Neither did mine, I said. That summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence. And when Sandra and them looked at me funny, I just made believe I didn't care. Some mornings my mama watched us. I waited for her to tell me to get down from that fence before I break my neck or something, but she never did. I see you made a new friend, she said one morning, and I nodded, and Mama smiled. That summer, me and Annie sat on that fence and watched the whole wide world around us. One day, Sandra and them were jumping rope near the fence, and we asked if we could play. I don't care, Sandra said. And when we jumped, Sandra and me were partners, the way we used to be. When we were too tired to jump anymore, we sat up on the fence, all of us in a long line. Someday somebody's going to come along and knock this old fence down, Annie said. And I nodded. Yeah, I said. Someday.
So that is the end of our story. And for your on my own practice, we're going to think and reflect on the other side together. So in Seesaw, post or record a reflection answering these questions. How did your knowledge of Ruby Bridges from the nonfiction text help you understand the historical fiction text, the other side, better? 2, what is similar about the Ruby Bridges story and the other side? What is different? Finally, how does the message of the other side connect to today? And bonus, what is the theme of this story? Don't forget about your reading challenge and your daily practice pieces. And we can't wait to see what you do as a reader. Thanks for listening.